got a call from the White House saying, how dare you?
Ironic that the party that calls itself tolerance is so intolerant. People need to make some sort of decision.
It's getting harder and harder to keep your head in the sand. We have about half of people graduating from high school functionally illiterate. It says a lot about the twisted priorities and our government.
How do we fix this?
By firing those who are abusing their power. And
Welcome back, warriors. It's me, Linda B. Thank you all so much for joining me here today. Today, I wanted to give you some Tulsi Gabbard. You all are probably familiar with her. She ran as a Democrat back in 2020. Well, Tulsi has been in the news and on conservative news networks a lot over the past few months or over a year. She announced in 2022 that she had left the Democratic Party. But before we get started, I want you all to remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Also watch the video all the way to the very end. Don't forget that I am on social media as Chat With Me, Linda B, on Instagram, TikTok, and X. Now, without further ado, let's get into it.
This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yes.
Our audience is going to just love this. Okay, so you're one of my favorite troublemakers. I'm actually creating a collection of positive role models that are willing to cause trouble.
yes, we need them. We need more.
We need more, right? I want to start with the obvious. Tulsi, you have been a disappointment to the Democratic Party.
To say the least.
Raised you from an early age, I think in your 20s, and they couldn't control you. And so now they hate you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. First, just to comment on the growing group of troublemakers. There was a former civil rights leader, Congressman John Lewis, who has since passed away. But one of the things that he has often said and been known for was encouraging people to go out and make good trouble. And so I'm at a point in my life at this moment where, I don't hold any public office. I'm not like, oh, I'm employed by this company or that or whatever. Like, well, what are you doing now? It's like, this is my answer now, because it's a hard question. There's not a one word answer to that. It's just that I'm making good trouble wherever I can. Yeah. So I appreciate your team. And we talked a little bit earlier, I've admired you guys from a distance for a really long time. I first came across PragerU's content online and on social media and just admired how you took different issues. Sometimes they're complex, sometimes they're not, but really broke them down in a way that's very practical, easily consumable, all the imagery and everything else. Just phenomenal work in helping us to have a more educated and informed society.
I agree. I do like PragerU. I've done two videos on them, and you can go watch them. Amala Eknobi, and also on Carol Swain. Now, I do want to point back because when Tulsi Gabbard was talking a moment ago, she was talking about people that are willing to cause trouble. And, I was thinking about John Lewis, and she mentioned him. He said, be known for causing good trouble. There are people out there that are going to go along to get along. They just want an easy life. They don't want to ruffle anyone's feathers. But when you live like that, and if you're listening and if you're like that, you're really more likely to compromise your morals. You're more likely, not saying you will, but you're more likely to compromise your morals and do things that you don't feel is right. And of course, in Romans chapter 14 of the Holy Bible, if you think something is a sin and you do it anyway, to you it is sin, because your conscience is speaking loud against you, but you do it anyway. I'm the kind of person that is willing to cause good trouble. I am, the way I speak on this channel, you all have figured that out by now, that I am willing to be that voice. And there are certain things that I'm not allowed to say. And I'm trying to fit what I'm trying to do within this box. But, just hopefully things won't get any more restrictive. But I do agree with what Tulsi Gabbard is saying. Some of us are just not willing to go along to get along.
that's one of the things where the Democrat elite of today, where we have parted ways. I was homeschooled in Hawaii. I'm the fourth of 5 kids, and I'm so grateful that our parents chose to homeschool us at a time when it was not a thing. I think it has become increasingly popularized, even though there's still a bit of a stigma around it. But through that learning experience, they were small business owners. We had a family restaurant. So we all 5 of us worked at the restaurant in one capacity or another, just learning great work ethic, seek out information. They never dictated to us like, this is what you must believe or this is what your politics must be. They encouraged all of us to find those answers for ourselves, to gather information and to think critically and to ask questions. And whether they be around themes or issues or topics, or even just decisions that we made in our own lives for ourselves, is think through what the consequences of your decision will be, knowing that you have to live with them. I can't live your life for you. And just being raised in that way, I'm incredibly grateful to them for, because even as I was 21 years old in Hawaii, preparing to run for office for the first time, really motivated out of a passion that I had and still have for the environment, and really being custodians for what Mother Nature has provided rather than just exploiters, was what caused me to start to think about getting involved with politics. And a lot of it was centered around clean water. We are the most remote island chain in the world in Hawaii. And there was an instance where somebody wanted to come and build a landfill over one of our water aquifers, which provided clean drinking water for 30% of the population on the island of Oahu. And so it was as a late teenager, I helped gather signatures against it. And the long story short was we won. The people won. And the landfill guy was trying to grease the skids with his friends, politicians, donors, whatever, they lost. And for me as a teenager, it showed me what's possible when, we come together around common cause to make a difference. So when I was about to run for office, 21 years old, not affiliated with a party, no natural, like no lineage of politics from my parents or grandparents or whatever,
No college degree.
no college degree, which my Republican opponent at the time pointed out at every opportunity. What I saw in Hawaii's history of politics with the Democratic Party, but also some key national figures like President JFK and Martin Luther King and some others, I was drawn to a party that appeared to stand for free speech, that seemed to welcome people from all different backgrounds, different ideas, encourage discussion, stood up for civil liberties and privacy and against the big arm of government overreach into the most personal parts of our lives. These were things that I appreciated and felt aligned with. And so I joined the Democratic Party.
That what she just said just now really resonated with me. She joined a party that seemed, put emphasis on the word seemed, like it was for civil liberties, free speech, these iconic figures. But when you dig into some of those iconic figures, you're going to find out some things about them, some of the ones that she just named. Just saying, you're going to find out some things about those names, JFK and MLK, that she just mentioned. So we have to, sometimes what's put out there in the mainstream, where you can just Google it and go on certain sites, and sometimes it's just not accurate. What's easily accessible, what the mainstream is pushing, you'll soon find, if you're willing, that is not quite what it says. It's just not quite what it says, and that's just the truth. It's just not quite what it says. And she said the party seemed like it was for free speech and things like that. We know, those of us who know what she thought she found out. I'm just going to let her finish talking.
In no race that I've run at state level, county, or in Congress, I've never been that candidate that the party has sought out and said, well, we want you to run for office. I was always the unlikely person to win in any of those races.
I'm surprised because you kind of fit the victim
Well, and
bingo
that's
mold
what
that
was
they look
surprised
for,
me.
right?
Like it never ever occurred to me before until I won my primary in the race for Congress. And in Hawaii, it's a strong Democratic state. You win the Democratic primary, you have essentially won. And what you're talking about, like, happened right away. It was, I don't know, maybe a week after the election, I got a call from Nancy Pelosi. I served in the National Guard at the time, and I was just wrapping up my National Guard duty. And I got a call, and uh, she said, "This is Nancy Pelosi. Congratulations on your win. We're looking forward to having you in Congress. Um, would you like to come and speak at the Democratic National Convention on the main stage during prime time about veterans? We'll give you a couple of minutes to do it." I was like, of course, I'd love to have that opportunity. And what happened starting at that point was very surreal. To have people on CNN and MSNBC around the convention saying, "Oh, so and so famous actor is going to play Tulsi Gabbard in the movie," or like all this stuff. A few months later, Vogue called and like, "We want to do a spread and a whole profile piece." And I was asked to be vice chair of the DNC within weeks of swearing into Congress, something that I had no idea. My answer literally was, "What is a vice chair of the DNC? And what do they do? What are you really asking of
I
me?"
bet we still wonder,
I know.
truly.
And it's defined differently by different people depending on who's in charge. But all of these things, and there's so many, like I was invited to the White House Correspondents' Dinner my first year in Congress.
Mm.
And I had people who'd been there for a decade. They're like, "How come I've never been invited?
Yeah,
And you get to go?" Like,
because
like
you
I'm just
look
like, but
perfect.
that's what it was. That's exactly what it was, Marissa. And that became very clear as I was 31 years old, a quote unquote woman of color, female veteran, first of two female combat veterans ever elected to Congress. And all of these things very much fit the mold and the talking point of identity politics.
Identity politics, which is something that the left does a lot. People of color, but it's not, of course, it's great to have diversity, of course. Of course, but all of that diversity needs to also include diversity of thought, not just what we look like, our color, our gender. It needs to also include diversity of thought. And I'm pretty sure she's going to get into this, that whatever diversity of thought is not welcome on the left, it is just not welcome. All these ways, different ways of thinking, they pretty much want everyone to think in lockstep with one another. That's why there's so much backlash when you come with a different thought or a different idea. You will see that backlash. And in the news lately has been State Representative Misha Maynor out of Fulton County, and which is, of course, in Georgia, the state where I live. And she received a lot of backlash from the Dems. She really did, because of her ways of thinking about school choice and safer neighborhoods. When you don't think the way they want you to think, it's hard. Is really, really hard.
I didn't fully see it at the time, but in hindsight, now I know it was like, all right, we're going to dangle all the trinkets in front of her and show her what this world could look
Mhm.
like if she wants to be a part of the team.
Right. I call it the diamond cage.
Exactly. It didn't last long. It was that summer of August of 2013, my first year in Congress. I was a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Homeland Security Committee at the time. I would later, that following year, move to the Armed Services Committee. But President Obama came and said he would come to Congress to ask for authorization to go to war in Syria. This decision that he said he would come to Congress for was exactly why I ran for Congress. I had come from two deployments to the Middle East that changed my life completely. I had deployed with the Hawaii Army National Guard, volunteered to deploy on both of those fronts, left my seat in the state legislature to do so. I served in a medical unit in Iraq during that first deployment, where every single day I was confronted with the high human cost of war, both in lives lost, but also in both visible and invisible wounds. I was confronted with the war profiteering that drives so many of these wars that are supported by the elite in both parties. I came back from that deployment completely changed and knowing that I could not go back to the life that I'd left behind. But those experiences are what drove me to run for Congress. So when President Obama made that announcement, I immediately started to dig into why. What does he want to do? Asking the basic questions that all politicians should ask when faced with the question of war or peace. What is our objective? What are you seeking to accomplish? How will you know when you've quote unquote won? What's the exit strategy? What will you do if they counterattack in some fashion? So these questions that are basic, common sense questions I asked of the administration. It was Secretary of State John Kerry at the time and others from the White House, the Department of Defense, the State Department, in open and closed hearings. And what surprised me most was that even in, again, this is 2013, we'd been at war in Iraq for quite some time. And there were a lot of people who I would have hoped had learned some lessons. Um, they didn't have answers to those basic questions that I asked, like, "Oh, we're going to go drop some bombs to send a message." I said, "Okay, well, how will they likely react to this military attack on their country?" "Oh, we don't think they will." Really? And so on and so forth. All of that work that I did uh, caused me to conclude that going and launching another war that would be the first strike in a regime change war, which is what the Obama administration was pushing for, would ultimately not end well for us or the Syrian people, and had a strong likelihood we would end up in yet another quagmire, not only between the United States and Syria, but it would likely turn into a regional war. Came out and wrote an op-ed stating this, and immediately got a call from the White House within 24 hours saying, "How dare you?" Not, "Hey, tell us more about your position," or "How can we provide you with, new information or arguments to address your valid concerns? You're a veteran, you've been deployed to the Middle East, you have a certain experience that maybe we can learn." Nothing like that. It was, "How dare you go against your president? How dare you as a freshman Democrat? You haven't even been here a minute and you're challenging the leader of your party and one who was born in your home state in Hawaii." It was surprising to me that they didn't care at all about the seriousness of the objections that I raised, the concerns that I raised, and what was really at stake. All they cared about was, why are you not being a team player? How dare you betray your president? And in my heart, they were betraying my brothers and sisters in uniform. And it showed me that they really didn't care. After
No, it seemed like they didn't care. And the guilt trip that they made on her, how dare you, not support your president? How dare you? You got to watch it when people use those guilt trips on you just for asking questions. Her questions were legitimate questions. So why are we doing this? What do we hope to get out of it? How do we anticipate that Syria will respond? What do we want to get out of this? Why are we doing this? I mean, these are valid questions. Instead of them asking, well, how did you come up with this? How dare you? You're not supporting your president. And he's from the same state as you are. I love the way she says Hawaii. I think that's how she said it.
that, there was more opposition that came to what he was asking. So he never actually came and it was never brought to a vote. And ultimately, he did not take that action. But that was the first sign to them and the Democratic leadership that I wasn't going to be the one to just smile for the cameras and vote according to what they send out in the email every morning, that I was going to question them and had no qualms about standing up against them when I knew that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, it sounds like you may have felt like they wanted your diversity of appearance. They didn't really want
Yes.
your diversity of thought. That wasn't really welcomed.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize that the the issue that you had with the left was not just about the conflicts, but at what point did you say, wait a second, I actually don't even belong here at all, right? Because it sounds like you've just completely left the left.
Yes. It was different things over time. I'll give you an example. While I was in Congress, uh, there was the earth-shattering news about how horrible the wait times at the VA were. You remember that veterans were having to wait sometimes a year just to get an appointment. Um, we saw examples of physical abuse from VA employees to veterans that were documented on, closed circuit cameras within different VAs. All of these different things were coming to light at a time when the growing numbers of veterans were increasingly becoming post 9/11 generation veterans, my generation. And Hawaii is a strong union state.
Mm.
It Unions in Hawaii, their history and why Hawaii became such a strong union state was these unions were the voice for everyday working people who were essentially being abused and taken advantage of by what was back then the four wealthy landowners in Hawaii. Without getting into all the history, that beginning of the good intentions behind labor unions was a very real thing. And if unions had stuck to that, I think we'd be in a very different place. But this legislation that I was a part of and supported in Congress would have made it easier to fire employees, government employees in the VA who were abusing veterans and essentially not doing their job, fired
Wow.
for cause. Because even in those examples, when they have video evidence of this abuse taking place, I think it took 4 or 5 years to get rid of that employee. And so, I mean, it made me angry, as it
Yeah.
should every American, to see this happening. But I also learned a lot about the stranglehold many of these government unions have um, on power,
Mm.
and how it is not in the best interest of the workers who are there to serve people,
Right.
supposedly. Instead, it became more and more clear that this is a system where it's about political power to feed the bureaucracies, and those who are getting the dues that those workers are required to pay to the unions, and helping politicians who will protect the interest of the union bosses rather than the interests of the American people. It really came through, and I had the visit from the union after I took that vote saying, how dare you go against our wishes, because I think I had probably been endorsed by that union, the American AFGE, American Federal Government Employees Union. And I just found it audacious for them to come to me as a veteran and criticize me for taking a stand to protect veterans and make sure that the VA is focused on caring for veterans rather than protecting abusive employees of the federal government.
I think I heard some things about the issues that were going on in the VA. Tell me your comments below. The abuse. Okay, these employees are abusing veterans, people who fought for our country, the United States of America, and they don't get in trouble until years later. They don't get removed supposedly. These people gave their lives for our country. And they should be the last ones, the very last ones to be abused. This is some downright foolishness. They want to protect the abusive employee because they want to make sure that employee pays their dues to that union. Ugh. And it was another how dare you moment. Everything is just so not what it should be. And Tulsi Gabbard wants to do the right thing, protect our veterans. She's a veteran. How dare they come to an actual veteran who served her country, who was willing to die for this country? She cares for the people she should care about. Oh,
And so it was things like that over time where, at the outset, and I will say this, is like, well, I try to assume the best in people. I try to find the good in people and say, well, even with good intentions, maybe there's ways to improve it. But the more I learned, and the more I think people across the country are learning, is that those intentions aren't good.
Mm.
It's about power and not the people. It's not like, oh, oops, we meant it to do
No,
something
no,
good.
it's not oops.
It's
It's
about power,
Mhm.
and that's what is so dangerous, and the seriousness with what we're facing now, um, specifically 2024, this election. I go into this in great detail in my book about what is at risk. Is this is not a Democrat versus Republican thing. My book obviously talks about why I left the Democratic Party, but this is a situation where we have people in positions of power willing to abuse their position in order to preserve their power, so much so that our fundamental freedoms as Americans is what is at risk.
I mean, you talk about the unions. I relate to this so much because, my background is in education.
Right.
And whenever I criticize the teachers' unions, the AFT or the NEA, they attack me for saying that I'm anti-teacher.
Yeah.
And I'm not anti-teacher. I'm anti-union bosses. I'm anti the corrupt elite. And when you talk about how this problem is really not a left versus right problem, it really is a problem of big government
Yes.
elites, the people who are basically puppeteering this entire space, and the rest of us who are really starting to ask questions.
Yeah.
I think when I say the rest of us are starting to ask questions, the first thing that the left really does, and the media does, is to try to label us as a white nationalist,
Mhm.
like whatever names they've called you, they probably called me, and vice versa.
They've called me all those things
All the
too. Yeah.
troublemakers. Like now we just own it, right? All the
Yeah.
troublemakers, we're right wing extremists.
Yeah.
Which the truth is we're not. We're asking the questions that we're not allowed to ask,
Yeah.
and I think there are a lot of people who are in this purgatory
Mhm.
space. It started with Dave Rubin. I remember Dave Rubin came into PragerU and I said, "You left the left." And I said it publicly, said, "Don't say that I'm not on the left anymore," right? And you talk about Joe Rogan, and there are so many, Elon Musk. I mean,
Mhm.
because you dare to ask, because you are a troublemaker, they label you as a right winger.
Yeah.
But it's really not about that. It's really about seeking truth and understanding that these so called experts or unions or people who are supposedly helping us are
Mhm.
actually really hurting us.
Yeah.
What, at what point did you say to yourself, I'm done with the labels? Are you done with the labels? What are you?
I
And
am so done with the
are
labels.
you politically homeless? Like
Yeah,
what do people like you do?
I've always had a problem with labels. Because and I've had like professional political consultants tell me, even back when I ran for president 2020, they're like, who are your people? Because you don't fit in with this group and this label, you don't fit in with that group and that label. And like, this is a bad political plan, Tulsi. Like, what you're doing is not going to work out well for you. But because I've always been an independent minded person, I had a lot of Republican friends of mine, some in Congress, saying, awesome, now you can come join our party and
Here
join
we
our
are with arms
team.
wide open.
Right, exactly. And I had some pretty deep conversations with some of them, just asking them, well, tell me, what is the Republican Party today? Because I can see some very big differences between, a Liz Cheney and a Matt Gaetz,
Hmm.
or a Nikki Haley versus a Donald Trump. And I think it's good and it's healthy that there is actually space in the Republican Party of today for different views and pretty vigorous debate. Um, Whereas today's Democratic Party, there is none.
Mm.
There is none. We were talking a little bit as we were getting ready about, the Bernie Sanders, who's now very much, if not in name, in actuality, a part of the Democratic Party, and others people who I worked with who were traditionally civil liberties advocates, people who were advocates for peace, people who said, no, we should be challenging leaders who are trying to get us into more needless war. They have largely fallen silent. And this is not a new phenomena. We saw this with President Obama under his administration. that a lot of us who supported him because of those positions he took against the Patriot Act, those positions that he took against more needless wars of choice that are counterproductive to our interests, and then saw how, with the Espionage Act, for example, he became the president who charged and prosecuted more people under the Espionage Act than all presidents before him combined. An act that has largely been used as a political weapon.
I want to go back to what she was saying. I try not to pause too often, but I noticed that politicians that try to do the right thing, celebrities, anyone of any industry, any voice that asks those particular questions that goes against the status quo, your Elon Musks, your Donald Trump, your Tulsi Gabbards, people like that, us, are labeled troublemakers. And the mainstream media always demonizes those people. So what I've learned is, oh, well, your Marjorie Taylor Greens, to love her. I've learned that those people that are demonized in the mainstream media, I put emphasis on mainstream media. Not all media is mainstream, but those funded by this particular person, they demonize the people that are trying to do right by the American people. These people that are demonized in the mainstream media have good morals. They want what's right. They're not all angels, but they want what is right, and they challenge the system that is designed to look one way, but is really hungry for control, for power, as she mentioned earlier. So anyone that's demonized in mainstream media, you should take a second or third look at, because they're probably not anywhere near what the mainstream media is presenting them to be. The ones that, like your Nikki Haley's, praised in the mainstream media, praised your Donald Trumps. They couldn't be farther apart, but they both belong to the same party. Some of you believe that Nikki Haley is a rhino. Um, you know, she she was put up and praised in the mainstream media. So that lets me know that's not right, because they are for her. They praised her. If they praised Tulsi Gabbard, they praised her until she left. And then Hillary Clinton accused Tulsi Gabbard, this woman right here, of being a Russian spy. She was on The View and accused Tulsi Gabbard of being a Russian spy. I can't believe, Hillary Clinton will pull that Russian stuff right out of her purse when she don't like you, when she was mad that she didn't win in 2016. Well, that Russia collusion hoax, that was her. Tulsi Gabbard said some things she didn't like. Oh, she's a Russian spy. Girl, if you're gonna lie, at least come up with another kind. You can't even think of anything else. You stuck on Russia. Sit down, Hillary Clinton. Hillary.
With Daniel Ellsberg, who released the Pentagon Papers. And then you look at President Trump, who's facing over 300 years in prison because of Espionage Act charges, and the double standard that's there when you look at President Biden and Hillary Clinton, all these other people who have done the very same things that he is being accused of. There is so much that's going on that is causing more and more Democrats, independents, Americans as a whole, to be confronted with this reality of how those in power are abusing their power. It's getting harder and harder to keep your head in the sand. But the silver lining there is that I think it's waking up a lot of people who aren't rushing to join one party or another party. But my hope is that they're recognizing that the only way that we fix what is being attacked and destroyed in the sense of our rights that are enshrined in the Constitution, the only way we fix that is if every one of us, takes responsibility and ensures that we really do have a government of, by, and for the people, and lift our voices and cast our votes accordingly.
Well, ultimately, people can't stay in purgatory, right? People need to make some sort of decision. It's ironic that the party or the group that calls itself tolerance is so intolerant,
Yeah.
right? There is no tolerance on the left. And when you talk about how maybe people will say that the right is discombobulated, right? Because you have so much diversity. But isn't diversity better than the uniformity that is required on the left? left. I actually think that the silver lining is that people are seeing that as well.
Yes.
And when you talk about the things that people are waking up to,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's the military industrial complex, or the issue with the food pyramid being completely upside down,
Yeah.
and what the AMA is telling Americans about what is healthy and what is not healthy, or you just talk about even mental health complex
Yeah.
of medicating our children. I mean, these examples can go on and on. We mentioned the unions, the teachers unions. People seem to be waking up as if this is something new,
Mhm.
right? It's like, oh my God, what has happened to America over the last 5 or 10 years? I can't believe what has happened to this amazing country. Can we just go back to the 80s? And part of me says, okay, yes, things do feel like they're way worse.
Yeah.
Maybe our eyes are starting to see something, but maybe our eyes have been really blocked from seeing
Mhm.
the truth for a long time, because in your book you outline a history of corruption,
Yeah.
not something that has happened over the last 10 years. The New York Times has been lying to America for years, and that
Yes.
is our paper of record.
Yeah.
So is it getting worse? Is this stuff new? Or are Americans actually starting to see something that in the past people like you, elected officials like you, who spoke against the narrative, who broke through that diamond
Mhm.
cage, people like you are now actually being able to speak out? Is that the new part here, or are things worse?
I think it's a combination of all of those things. Um, the things that we are seeing happening now and today, their actions are becoming more and more brazen and being done in broad daylight. Whereas in the past, maybe they were done behind closed doors, and they were able to keep the secret and put on this show, create this facade of reality that actually wasn't very real at all.
The reality wasn't very real at all. So corruption, I told you about Lyndon Baines Johnson in the Milliplex way back then. We're talking back in the 60s. He left office, being worth $900 million. Back then in the 60s, he was worth a ton of money. So things were hidden back then. So this corruption has been going on for a very long time, really since the 1800s, probably even prior to that. But I know since the 18, I think it was the election of 1876. That was a very tumultuous election. People are so hungry for power and they will do anything. The government sometimes, when it wants to keep people in control, like in those communist countries, they want people to walk lockstep and think alike. The left, as they've already mentioned, wants diversity of appearance, but not diversity of thought. So when they say diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not the truth. Because if you think differently, those are brainwashing stations. Okay. So things that were done have been done wrong a very long time, but now people are just waking up and noticing it more. I mean, your eyes are open, and I believe it's God wanting our eyes to be open to the truth. And how dare we as Americans actually have a brain and ask questions? How dare you use your brain that God gave you? Just walk in lockstep. Well, some of us are not going to walk in lockstep with foolishness, period.
Because they wanted us to live in some kind of blissful ignorance and believing that they have our best interest at heart, when in fact they have been interested in serving a corporate interest or a big donor interest, whether it be, as you mentioned, pretty powerfully in the area of war and peace, with President Eisenhower warning us back then of what we are seeing today. This is how we know it's been going on for a very long time. Wars being waged and regimes being toppled to help the produce industry in America. There are a lot of different examples that show us that this has been going on for quite some time. I think this is part of the difference is twofold. Is now they're doing it in broad daylight and essentially normalizing it, and doing so very often in the name of saving democracy or national security, to get us to accept their power grab and their undermining of our fundamental liberties. And secondly, the the skepticism that more and more people have for what they're hearing on cable news, and maybe not, if they're not recognizing it fully, getting the inkling like, hey, all these people are saying the same thing, and looking for other media sources through social media or online or whatever the case may be, listening to podcasts, watching content that you're creating here. People are being exposed to far more voices who have unique experiences and backgrounds than they had access to previously. And this is where I think, even as bad as things are, there is opportunity, and I hope, even in elections like we saw in Virginia, with the election of Governor Youngkin over Terry McAuliffe, who's like, if you could create, a prototype of like a candidate out of the Clinton machine, he's it. He's literally it. And everyone said he was supposed to win that election for governor. It was not even a doubt that he wouldn't win. But what changed? He said parents shouldn't have a right to have a say in their kids' education. And parents heard him. And it didn't matter what he tried to flub his way through retraction. Parents said, no, how dare you in government think you can take away our rights? And they did something about it.
Again, the left. He was a Democrat, I bet you that. So, and I'm not even familiar with the names that she just gave who were fighting for governor, who were, trying to become governor. But the one that said parents should not have a right over their children's education, yeah, that was a Democrat. Because Republicans don't say that. Not a true Republican, not a true Republican. Republicans pretty much most of the time are for school choice, parental rights over our children, not for the wokeism being taught in schools, want traditional classic education, classical education, which is just reading, writing, arithmetic, science, history, that, but not the indoctrination. On the left, the Dems, I call them the Dems, Demon Rat Party, are more for all this woke and crazy stuff, letting your child decide their identity and do things with their body without allowing the parents to know about it. I would never vote for that. When you vote Demon Rat, that's what you get. Parents lose control over deciding what's best for their children. That is insane. All parents should not go for that. Period. That's what woke me up to leaving and being more on the conservative side, because I saw the indoctrination, the things that were being brought into the schools. I said, oh, HE double hockey sticks. No, I said HE double hockey sticks now, because I'm from the South. No, that is crazy. That is wrong. That is morally bankrupt. It is debaucherous. It is sinful. It is satanic. And yeah, I said it. That's some foolishness. Can you even believe we having this conversation? Did somebody hit their head? Y'all better leave them drugs alone.
And that's the power that we have in our hands if we choose to use it.
I think the fact that they're going after the families is
Yes.
what's really waking people up. The debate about what we should do with our children is
Yes.
in every household, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has kids, whether they have kids or not, everybody has kids in their lives who they care about. And when they hear that the government should take over family rights, right? The pertinent to children,
Yes.
whether they should get vaccinated or they should have gender affirming care,
Mhm.
mutilation,
Mhm.
and education of little children with no say from the parents. I think that is really what's waking people up, because it's in our homes. These
Yes.
issues. I mean, obviously, COVID had a big impact on Americans, where they were like, wait a second, I can't say I'm not that political anymore.
Mhm.
I mean, I remember growing up hearing from friends of mine, oh, Marissa, you're so political.
Mhm.
I'm not that political anymore. But once it's in your home,
Yes.
once it's in your kids' schools,
Yes.
once it's in your body, once you're hearing that Lucky Charms is healthier for you than fried eggs, like, some light bulb has to turn on.
Yeah.
And you need to say, this is not about politics. This is about our freedoms and our lives.
Exactly. The thing about the Lucky Charms is this is like, are we living in some kind of weird satirical fantasy world where they'll yell cut and like, oh, okay, well, obviously that was stupid. uh,
So yes, what was just stated here by Tulsi Gabbard, oh, such a good interview. And you can see the entire one at PragerU. But the entire amount of the video is an hour. So I just feel like that's where we're headed as a country, like freedoms being taken away. And we have to ask the questions. Clearly, it's not a good idea to make everybody just think alike. And on the left, you have no diversity of thought, just diversity of appearance. You know, you're a female, you're a Black person, you're Asian, you're this, but you have to still think like they want you to think. Tulsi Gabbard, who is a woman of color, and they promoted that. They hopped on that train. You know, identity politics, is what the left does, but they don't want you to think for yourself. How dare you think for yourself? And that's how you know where this country could possibly, well, it is being headed, it's headed that way. And it's sad, it's terrifying to a degree. I have to sometimes I just want to pretend that things aren't happening because I don't want to focus on this all the time. But we need to wake up and we need to demand more of our leaders and stop going along with the status quo. People that go along with the status quo are getting their pockets lined, they're getting their purses filled. And that is unfortunate, because we don't need leaders, political leaders like that. We need people that are going to be servants at heart, have a servant's heart, not serve themselves, but serve the people. What's in the best interest of the people in our country? What is more biblical values, conservative values? You all give me your thoughts. Tell me what you think. Leave your comments below. Thank you all so much for watching the video thus far. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. You all be blessed. Have a great weekend. It's Friday. And march on, warriors.